Hello, I'm Carwyn Jones and welcome to this week's Business News Wales Weekly News Review. Well, the last week has seen the constant rise of coronavirus. As you can see, I'm sitting here in the house, not going out as per instructions, but we've seen things change very quickly over the past week. We've seen Italy overtake China in terms of number of cases, and the US now has the largest number of cases in the world. We hear from China that the illness is beginning to decline. We'll all be keeping a close eye on what happens there when the restrictions are slowly lifted in that country. But as far as the UK is concerned, we've seen some pretty draconian powers being taken by Welsh Government and UK Government, asking people not to go out except for a walk once a day, and mainly to stay in the house. And we've seen, of course, many businesses closed down. Only essential businesses are open, and that undoubtedly has had an incredible effect on the economy. We hear, for example, that over 3 million people in the US have been made redundant almost overnight as a result of the restrictions with coronavirus. So today I thought it would be useful for us to hear from two people who are very much at the front line when it comes to advising business. I'm joined again today by Robert Lloyd Griffiths, the Director of the Institute of Directors in Wales. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much.
And also by Ben Cottam, Director of the Federation of Small Businesses in Wales. Both, of course, organisations that represent the bulk of our businesses, together with the CBI, and of course we'll be hearing from so many businesses in terms of their problems and the difficulties that they're facing. We know, of course, that the government has put in place, the UK government and the Welsh government both, a substantial financial package which has helped immensely in terms of giving some comfort to businesses, but we know there's still some issue around the self-employed, although we've seen an announcement from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And of course, we know that there are some people on zeros contracts in the gig economy who perhaps fall outside the help that's been given. But let's look now at what the effect so far has been on businesses in Wales. Robert, if I could start with you, in your role with the Institute of Directors, what are you hearing from businesses?
Well, we are undergoing a detailed and lengthy consultation with all our members. Our office in Wales is phoning up our members and chatting with them every day, and it's a well-used phrase of unprecedented times, and these are hugely unprecedented times. There's a lot of nervousness. There's a lot of businesses that have been significantly affected, as you alluded to in your introduction. Those that have already engaged in the furloughing of staff. There are those that are really worried about their continuity with only days for survival. The hospitality, the entertainment, the tourism sector has been really hard hit. And there is a sense of huge concern, but also I've detected a sense of camaraderie within the business community of getting on with it as best they can under very trying and difficult circumstances. I think the most important thing that businesses are looking forward to receiving is clarity of the things that the government have introduced, and its communication, what's available to them, and speed of support. Getting that support out there. So I think that's one of the biggest concerns is getting that help, getting that support quickly.
You mentioned camaraderie there, Robert. We've seen examples around the world of people serenading each other.
Yeah.
Applause, of course, for health workers. What examples have you seen of camaraderie in the business community?
I think one example yesterday, Industry Wales and Life Sciences Hub put out a request for businesses who are involved in the manufacture of implements that can help and support health manufacturing and ventilators. Businesses have done their utmost to spread that word. I know that Ben's organisation, my organisation, CBI, Chambers of Commerce, are tweeting and retweeting and actually getting out to their members or our members to try and encourage them to participate in what is a national effort. So there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of sharing of information, sharing intelligence, and businesses are stepping up to supporting each other as perhaps never before because of these extenuating circumstances. So that's just one example. And we saw this week, the days tend to merge into each other, don't they? The consultant in West Wales who has teamed up with businesses to create a ventilator, and it's now in production. So businesses are responding quickly. They're responding fast to the needs of the community and getting on with it. And I think it's really impressive and refreshing to see those good news stories. And I'm sure Ben has an equal number of stories.
Yes, Ben, in terms of small businesses, what are you hearing in terms of some of the challenges that they face? I mean, some of them are well known, of course, but for a lot of them, I suspect, cash flow is crucial, work is crucial, and for many of them, a few days without that cash flow makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. And I think what we've seen with this that we probably weren't anticipating is the speed of the effect on smaller businesses. Very, very early on, we saw businesses in real peril. Yes, cash flow is the major concern for them. And we saw sectors like retail, hospitality, pubs immediately hit, obviously affected by the Prime Minister's advice first to stay away and then the direction to close pubs, for instance. So those businesses faced real challenges that day. And the speed, obviously, Welsh Government, UK Government have put in place measures to support those businesses, but there is a real, as Robert mentioned, there's a real urgency to get that support out and available to a point where businesses can be certain of their survival and even in the short term. So there is real concern. I think we're working through it as best we can. We're trying to gather in the examples of where businesses are falling through the cracks, because we know that the schemes that have been announced to date have some, do have some limitations. So we're trying to find out where businesses are falling through the cracks and understand what more support might be needed. But I think Robert points to that point about camaraderie, and we've seen with small businesses really gelling with their communities, gelling with efforts to form, local Facebook volunteering groups, for instance, to volunteer to ship medicines, groceries, things like that around to vulnerable people. So this is where business really does come into its own. When we talk about businesses, both large and small, being at the heart of our communities, I think this is the time when we realise that really is the case.
And for many small businesses, of course, they're still functioning. We need them to function, not just in terms of the supply chain, but also, of course, the corner shops, the garages, all those businesses that people need, the pharmacies that people need to access in order to deal with the situation. How difficult is it for people to retain staff? Are you hearing stories of those businesses that we need to stay open, being able to retain the staff they have, or are there difficulties in ensuring that there's sufficient people to run those businesses?
Yeah, we are hearing some cases where it's difficult for businesses to retain staff. Obviously, a number of staff are subject to self-isolation, and if you're a small business with only maybe 4 or 5 employees, then to have 1 or 2 off is a significant hit. I think there are businesses that are trying to have a conversation also with employees about their own concerns. Where they need the staff, but obviously employees have their own concerns about the impact on them or their loved ones. So there are some very difficult conversations that businesses have to navigate with employees. And I think in the first instance, we would say, open that conversation, understand the challenges that individuals are facing with dealing with this. But I think businesses are finding a way through this as best they can. I think we are concerned with some of the things that are coming down the road. If I use tourism as an example, we have a situation where tourism is subject really quite substantially to seasonal labour. Now, obviously, a business in a tourist industry, for instance, we spoke to a business that operated boat tours, and they said, well, we can rely on the same people coming back year after year. However, in the absence of any certainty as to whether they're going to be able to operate in the short term, they are concerned that those individuals will go off and find more certain employment. For instance, the supermarkets are recruiting quite substantially at the moment. And so when they are able to get back up and running, there is a concern that they won't have the labour available. And obviously, when businesses are able to resume in the tourist economy, that we will have squashed the timescale for them to be able to make money for them to trade next year. So there are some real concerns in various sectors coming down the line, which we're trying to get our head across at the moment.
And yourself, Robert, what are you hearing from the organisations you represent?
Well, what I'm seeing is a range of different responses to the epidemic, as Ben has alluded to. And I saw one story on Business News Wales this week about Welsh butchers stepping up to the plate. And I think it's businesses being innovative and doing their best to respond to the current situation. A local butcher that we shop with in Whitchurch has stopped all people coming into the shop, but it's actually enabling people to go to order online or on the phone and then go and pick up their produce at a certain specified time. So it's businesses responding to the needs of their customers. And I think that the important thing is that down the line, when all this, please God, is over, businesses that have adapted and have been inventive in the way in which they operate will prove to be hugely, will reap the benefits of the way in which they've operated.
In terms of construction, Robert, we've heard from the construction industry that they're not quite clear what they should and shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Are you hearing anything in Wales from that sector about not quite understanding what they're being asked to do?
I have heard that, and I spoke with colleagues in Constructing Excellence in Wales that people were turning up to business sites not really understanding whether they would be allowed to actually work. And I think we're still relatively early days in terms of the comms activity, the communications activity, and what we need to do is to ramp that up so that everyone is in no doubt as to what they should and shouldn't be doing. And this is quite key across all sectors. People need to understand exactly where they are placed in terms of how they do business. And on the other side of the coin, people need to understand exactly where they sit in receipt of information and guidance as to what they need to do, both in terms of physical activity and also the response in terms of support that governments announce. The IoD, and I'm sure the FSB and all major organisations have really been at the forefront of having relationships with ministers and senior officials, both in Westminster and the Welsh Government. And it's what we've done is created a coronavirus hub on our website with all the latest information from the UK government, from Welsh government, from the Development Bank, and from a range and a raft of different organisations helping and guiding people for support. And I think it's incumbent on organisations like ours to be the focal point, if you like, of getting information out to businesses and being and assisting government communications. But it's got to happen. It's got to happen quickly, and it's got to be effective for people to understand exactly where they sit.
Ben, I'm an FSB member. I come to you and I say, I've seen all these announcements about support. Where do I go to actually access that support? In terms of what the FSB is doing, what have you got available as, in terms of services to your members?
So FSB has got a comprehensive package of support, legal advice, we've got insurance services, we've got HR advice, all through the FSB website. We have available to our members a free legal helpline, which is available 24 hours a day, and also some tools for business continuity planning, which we know is really important. And businesses need, if they haven't already, they need to sit down and look at that continuity planning and understand what these effects might be on their business. So we're working as hard as we can to get that support out to where it's needed. And I think we're working as hard as we can also with government, both Welsh government, UK government and local government, to make sure that the support that's been announced gets out as quickly as possible to where it's needed. I think we are seeing governments listening to business. It is very, very difficult. And I would signal my thanks to all our public servants who are working on these packages to support, because we know that it's very difficult for public services at the moment. But we have to make sure that support is able to get out on the ground and that people are clear as to how to access it. So we as FSB across the UK and certainly here in Wales are working as closely as we can with public agencies to make sure that there is no confusion about the support that's available and that it gets to where it needs to be. And I think the latest announcement on self-employment is very good, it's very positive. The Chancellor's listened to what FSB has been saying. We know, though, that there are gaps, and we think there is an opportunity for Welsh Government now with its own support to look at how we can fill some of those gaps in Wales. So that's our next task at the moment.
Can I echo what you said about public servants there? They don't always get the best of press, as we know, but I've been involved, of course, with lots of issues in the past where we've had to respond very quickly to an emergency, and I've always been impressed by the willingness of so many of those people to go the extra mile, where they're in work well beyond when they need to be, but they do care desperately about making sure that they deliver a good service to people. So I'd like to echo what you said there. Robert, in terms of yourself and the sort of directors, what are you hearing in terms of ease of access to information and ultimately, of course, to financial support?
I think I'll go back to my previous point about getting the communications right. I think that more work is needed in streamlining communications. I mean, our organisations have the facility that we can get out directly to our members, but also from our coronavirus hub, it's open to absolutely anybody. But it's hugely important that businesses understand and have clarity of how it affects them and their particular circumstances. And I think that I know that Ken Skates was on this podcast last week, and he highlighted the number of calls to Business Wales had gone from, I don't know, under 100 to well over 1,000 in a day. And I think Business Wales is coming into its own in terms of getting messages across as well. And I would encourage businesses in Wales to contact Business Wales for clarity and for understanding and for information relating and pertaining to their particular circumstances. There's the website for Business Wales as well, and that's really important. But each individual business will have a certain and differing set of circumstances which relate to them specifically, and I'm seeing that in all the calls that I'm making, all the conversations I'm having with our business members and others. And I think one of the key things is to understand that different businesses have different requirements, and we've got to really make it as clear as possible how it affects them. I spoke to a business yesterday who was really having difficulty in grasping the furlough issue and how it would affect his particular business, and also what effect and how rigid it would be implemented by HMRC, and he was greatly concerned. I mean, one of the key things that he was telling me was that some of his he needed to furlough most of his members of staff, but he needed also to keep some back for when opportunities would arise. But what the information is coming out is it's really difficult to use furloughed members of staff to help with business continuity, and it's a conundrum. So it's a real clarity of understanding as to what needs to be done and how it needs to be understood by businesses across Wales.
You mentioned clarity there. One of the things that I've noticed is a tendency by the media in London particularly, and I have to say with the UK government, to make announcements as if they cover the whole of the UK. Yeah. And we saw that, for example, with the NHS volunteering scheme, which only applied in England, but that wasn't made clear at all in terms of what the UK government said. Is there any confusion there as far as businesses are concerned? I mean, they should. I mean, most of the time, of course, the governments are in the same place in terms of the advice they're giving, and in terms of the financial packages. But are you picking anything up, Robert, where businesses are saying, "Well, hang on a second, how do we know if this applies in Wales or not?"
I think that confusion, I think, is maybe a little bit too strong. I think there's just a lack of understanding sometimes as to where which government steps in. But that's always been the case. When we were with European law, with UK law, with Wales law, there's always been, people will see it as the government. That is the perception. It's the government, and so I think it matters not necessarily where the information is coming from, but it's how it applies particularly to that particular business. So I think businesses need to understand how it will affect them particularly, and there's lots of streams of information which will help and aid them in doing that.
I was quite struck with the Prime Minister's address on TV when he said, "Well, we're going to these are the rules we're bringing in; they will be enforced." And I knew full well that he had no power to do it, and had no power until the coronavirus bill was passed. And nor did he have any power to do it in Wales. But it's small things and not particularly important, I suppose, in the current situation. But it does illustrate that, again, we have this problem sometimes. It's always a problem so far because everyone's on the same turf. But when you have an announcement that's made that full well isn't actually quite correct, and secondly, doesn't apply to Wales. I mean, Ben, are you hearing anything any problems in that regard, or is the fact that really the message is the same from all governments in the UK? Does that not then create an issue at all for you? Oh, is Ben there? I ask myself. Well, apologies from here, because we seem to have lost Ben Cottam. We've tried several times to get him back, but Robert, I'm glad to say, is still with us. Now, we talked just a little earlier about clarity, Robert, and one of the issues, of course, that people have discovered almost is the ease of working online. I say that, of course, having just lost Ben, but let's pretend that he's still here. And from your perspective, are you hearing any businesses saying, well, we've found that it's easier sometimes to work online? When we think 20 years ago, this would have been impossible. We had video conferencing, but it didn't work very well, put it that way. We didn't have the internet in the same way in terms of its reach with commerce. So in many ways, businesses can go on, meetings can go on in a way they couldn't have done 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
What are you hearing in terms of what businesses are saying to you about how they're managing when people can't physically sit at the same table?
I think that's it. They're managing, and they're managing very well. Many businesses who are fortunate enough to be able to work from home are doing so, and they're doing so really well. It's just a different way of working. And what I am hearing is that people are saying that when all of this is over, there'll be a completely new way of working. Obviously we're all yearning for the time when we can meet each other and be in each other's company. But for the moment, it's really effective, it's efficient, and it's getting to grips with something that perhaps many of us hadn't done so much of. I mean, we in the IoD have meetings every morning. We get together then throughout the day individually with colleagues or collectively. And it's really useful. I'm also a member of the Board of Qualifications Wales, and we had a board meeting this week with about 25 people, all able to contribute, all able to make their points, and to be done swiftly and efficiently. I think one of the key things that I found is that because you're online, there is it's far more business-like, and you get through an agenda quicker and more effectively. I just think that's the way in which we're all working at the moment. On a slight downside is that we're all glued to our monitors and our computer screens from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. For someone like myself who gets out and about and meets members of the IoD and engages with governments and various different sectors of the economy, I spend a lot of my time in between meetings. It's a time to think and prepare for the next meeting, and to get all your ducks in a row in terms of your mindset. With working on your own at your computer, it's meeting after meeting after meeting, phone call after phone call, and it's something that I'm personally not used to. But we have to embrace it. It's the way in which we have to operate at the moment. So it's a different way of working. But businesses that I speak with that are actually perhaps doing this for the first time are getting good results and just getting on with it.
It is quite strange. As I'm sitting here, I can see the air encumbered door behind me that I meant to have fixed by now, which is hanging open, and the dog pawing at the door. That you probably heard that a little bit earlier on. So it's a bit strange in some ways. But what I've noticed is people have talked about the capacity of the current system that we have to cope with extra demand because people are working at home. And one of the things, of course, we have in the UK is we've not really invested properly in fibre optic cabling. It's trying to make copper cabling more effective, pretty much. It's, let's try and make the existing railway lines better rather than building a brand new, modern one. And I just wonder now whether this will give some more impetus to companies who actually want to have modern fibre optic cabling, not make do and mend, which is the typical British attitude, and get ourselves into a situation where we're competing with the best in the world.
Well, I think this episode will be a game changer, particularly in terms of the way in which we're able to communicate and what we're able to do, and how we're able to utilise home working and broadband and extra bandwidth. I mean, I suppose in Wales we have our beautiful topography and geography, which sometimes works against us in terms of connectivity. But we're going to have to triple and quadruple triple efforts into making this the way forward for the future. this has shown us that we need to be on top of our game, and our connectivity issues in Wales is going to be hugely important going forward. And that's one of the first things that when I engaged with Ken Skates and officials, one of the key things is, what can we do to expand broadband width and 5G and opportunities to enable businesses to be more connected.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that broadband is the equivalent in the 21st century to railway lines in the 19th.
Yeah.
And, really, it's we see it now where you and I are having a conversation which would just not be possible, perhaps even 10 years ago. I remember using video conferencing back at the start of the century, and you'd lose people over and over again. It was the ISDN line connection. And one of the things I remember very well is having a video conference with a number of councillors from North Wales in Flintshire County Hall. And they told me that they had a brand new system where the camera would follow the voice, so it would just move around according to who was speaking. Well, every time somebody spoke, the camera just turned and looked at the window. Yeah. So I spent my entire time staring at the car back in mould while trying to talk to various different council leaders. Yeah, we've come a long way.
We have come a long way, but it's also the immediacy of meetings, Carwyn. I think that's going to be really important. We live in a society or a business world where you'll set up a meeting for 3 weeks' time to meet with somebody, and you wouldn't necessarily before this think, actually, have you got 5 minutes on FaceTime or Zoom or Teams meeting now? And I think it's going to be a different way in which people will work. Those periods of time between meetings, I think, will very much narrow, and the immediacy and the expectation that, well, look, we can see you this afternoon at 3:35 for 10 minutes as opposed to 2 weeks' time for half an hour. Do you know what I mean? I think it's going to be a different way of working because we've done it.
That's true. I mean, I'm a little old-fashioned in the sense that when I'm speaking to somebody, I'd like to see them. Yeah, not physically, but I've never been one. I don't have phones much because you just hear a voice. It's a radio signal you're hearing effectively, but you don't actually see the person's face and their expressions. And I always think that's important in any business meeting. But of course, now we can do it without having to meet up physically. And you're quite right. The tendency is right. We need a meeting. When is everyone available in one place? Well, that's in 3 weeks' time, and let's hope that nothing happens in the meantime. Yeah. Now, I mean, what you're saying, you seem to think that this method of working will continue in the future, not just be something temporary.
I think it's going to have to be. I think for those of us of a certain age that perhaps weren't used to embracing this technology, I think we've proven that we can do it. We've proven that it's been successful. It works. It's immediate. It's responsive, and I think in a sense we can't really go back. I think there'll be a different blend of how we connect and communicate with each other going forward, particularly for those of my generation. Of course, the youngsters, I said the youngsters, only probably under 30, the millennials and Generation Z, it's the norm. But it's now, for sad reasons, become our norm, and I think we will have difficulty in going back. I'm like you, though. Pardon?
We have to sell our pigeons.
Well, there you go. Absolutely. And our tin cans and string. It's all going to go. It's all going to go.
Well, I mean, we're drawing to a close now in terms of this podcast. They're very difficult times for everybody. Just to remind everybody listening that businesswales.gov.wales is one of the websites the government has in order to provide information. You also heard today from the Institute of Directors and from the Federation of Small Businesses. There are lots of people out there who are able to offer help. Of course, they're overwhelmed as well, but with a bit of patience, we can make sure that people get the help that they need, both in terms of a little bit of support in terms of advice and, of course, crucially, the financial support that's already been announced. Well, belated thanks to Ben Cottam, who had to leave us early, despite the discussion we've had, Robert, about technology and the importance of it in terms of being able to communicate and run businesses in the future. Can I thank you? You're going to say you have one more point to make? Can
I just say one more thing, Carwyn? I mean, this is such a tough time for businesses, but what I've found hugely warming is that the resilience and the presence of mind in many business owners to actually get on with it and to make the best of a really difficult time. And it really impresses me continually, the resourcefulness of businesses up and down Wales in doing their absolute best for the economy, but for also their employees. And you know, let's be honest, in Wales, we've got so many micro businesses, 97% are micro businesses. You know, the business owners are doing their absolute best. Many I've spoken to will be taking pay holidays, pay freezes, just so that they can carry on and keep their businesses running over these difficult times. So, you know, 250,000 business owners here in Wales. Let's not forget that, you know, obviously they employ millions of people, but they are struggling as well. We're all struggling, but making the best of it to do what we possibly can to get ourselves back up and running, so that we can improve our economy and improve society. A better business means a better economy, I think, and that's what we need to do, and need to keep that sort of end game in mind constantly, that we're all doing our best to make Wales better. And finally, you know, I was on the front door of our house last evening at 8 o'clock, clapping our NHS workers who are just performing miracles daily. And so, you know, our hearts and thanks go out to them for all that they're doing for us, and all the others who are making such a massive impact for Wales at the moment.
Well, Robert, I don't think anybody could say it in a better way than you just have. My thanks to you for joining me today, and belated thanks to Ben Cottam, who, despite the discussion about technology, had to sign off early. Very difficult times, but I think your words are very important. Despite the difficulties, businesses are finding ways through, and it's hugely important that we remember that there will come a time. We don't know when yet, but there will come a time when all this will be over and things will get back to normal. It's a question of making sure that people have that support and advice that they need to bridge that quite substantial gap at the moment. Well, you've been listening to Business News Wales Weekly News Review with me, Carwyn Jones. Many thanks to my guests. Keep safe over the course of the next week, and I hope to join you again in a week's time. Goodbye.